Welcome everyone, so glad you could join me today, and we are doing another deck review. It's been a little bit since I've done one of these, so I just got my hands on the Fifth Spirit Tarot by Charlie Claire Burgess, and I'll say right off the start, I actually really like this one. So this is going to be a positive review. I know sometimes I'm kind of wishy-washy about the decks I look at, but I do really like this one. This is a first edition. This is an independently published deck. Might not be available everywhere you buy tarot cards. This one is in a store here in town, and I'll put a link in the description for where this copy came from if you want to get your own. And so this is called the Queer and Inclusive Decks for a World with Beyond Binaries is how it is described here on the back of the box. And it's a deck that the minors do not have any humans in them except for the court cards, and the majors do have humans in them, but they're very it's very gender and racial inclusive. It's a pretty typical cardboard box, hard box with the slide off of the top. I like the style of box. It's very sturdy, and it does come with a book. It's a thin book, and it's interesting because the book has a lot. It has information about the creation of this deck, but it has a lot more about actually reading the cards and what the cards mean. So I think it's really this book is going to be really good for intuitive readers who want to expand beyond just doing what the book says. So, this is how to determine a question, how to select a spread, or how to create a spread. She really goes through those issues here. There's simple tarot spreads. And it talks about the how tarot works. The actual information, like here's the first page of the Major Arcana, you can see the actual information is very scant about what each card means. And the same, I'll open to the Minor Arcana, also just a couple of lines for each card. And there's no information about reversals, it's just a couple lines about what each card means. The good news is that this deck is really created in a way, the art really, it doesn't need a lot of explanation, so let's start looking at the cards. First thing I will say is that they are slippery, but they have this, I don't know if you can see in the video, I'll try to catch the light here a little bit, they have this like linen finish that I have done a sample shuffle with these, and I'll show you that in a little bit after we go through the cards. But it does, it has a nice grippiness to them, that they're not just, the kind of slippery cards that go everywhere when you try to shuffle them. They have a good grippiness to them. So you see here, also they're not edged in any way, and the backs, theoretically, you could tell the difference on these backs because the infinity symbol in the center is hand-drawn. And you could, if you're really paying attention, you could definitely choose which one was upright and which one was reversed. That said, you're looking at them right now, they're very similar. So if you just shuffled and drew and you don't want to know which ones are reversed, you'd have to really look to be able to know which ones are reversed. So if you're trying not to see that, it's going to be very easy to ignore that and not pick up on that information, because it's a very minor difference. It's just in the hand drawing. You can see this is a Major Arcana card, the Fool, and it's the artwork in here, especially for the majors, I think, has a lot of similarity to a traditional Rider-Waite-Smith deck, but with definitely a modern twist, with definitely, and really thinking about the symbolism, because I think a lot of times tarot decks are like, I'm doing a twist on the tarot, and they're not really thinking about the symbolism of the tarot, and what does that symbol represent? They're just sort of recreating the symbol, or drawing the symbol in a new way. They're not thinking about the symbolism. And the other thing I'll point out, you'll see as we go through, and I will do a full flip through at the end of this, and I'll put a link to the time code in that in the bottom if you just want to see all of the cards. But you can, this person is carrying a white flower, and it's sort of in a white ink. Most of the major arcanas do have that sort of white ink, and a lot of times for me, what that symbolizes to me looking at these cards is the ethereal element of the card. That's something that's sort of like outside of the real world. It's the magical aspect of magical reality that that these illustrations are really going for. And so, like, here is the High Priestess, and you can see that, like, the moons at the top are in that white ink, whereas, she's sitting here with a bowl, and so it's a very, it's a modern deck. Everyone's wearing modern clothing, but it definitely does have that otherworldly aspect to it, and it does, it keeps a lot of the same symbolism that, she's got the black column, the white column, the pomegranates, the moon here, the tarot word on her arm rather than on the scroll that she's carrying. So there's a lot of symbolism that really carries over from the Rider-Waite-Smith. And so if you're used to that symbolism, it'll be very easy for you to pick up this deck. And as you can see, a lot of times, and I'll show you this when we get to the court cards, but, when I'm doing readings, you'll hear me say all the time, just because it's a king or a queen doesn't mean that that's a man or a woman, that they're energies, they're not genders. And this deck really feeds into that they are energies, not genders. So you can see here, the Emperor has both masculine and feminine features, and the ram's horns are in that white ink. The Hierophant is obviously a very positive interpretation of the Hierophant, which is very much like, a university lecturer rather than a stern religious figure. The Lovers is an interesting, very modern interpretation rather than being connection with another person. It's really connection with your shadow self. Some of the more negative cards of the deck, Death here shows this sort of life progression from baby to death. So it definitely has that regenerative quality that modern tarot usually interprets. The Devil is this sort of marionette situation, and and the Tower is this house on fire. You can see, like, again, this is the world. It's very similar to Rider-Waite-Smith imagery, but again, with a modern take on it. And, this is a good example that there is definitely nudity in this deck, but it's not sexualized nudity. So, who that's appropriate for is up to you, but there definitely is nudity in this deck. And I think it's just, there are nude people. They're not, like I said, they're not sexualized nude people. For the minors, it's very much leaning into the element. So wands are fire. They're not really wands because the imagery changes. So the ace is a lighter. The 2 is a match and a candle. The 3 is hot air balloons. So it's very much, they're called wands in the book. The court cards are called wands, but there's very much about fire. And I really like how these cards are, especially with the minors. They really transcend the usual interpretations, that they're not just copies of the Rider-Waite-Smith in, a modern setting. They are really thinking about what does that card mean, and, a new way to interpret that. For instance, just, this is a good one, actually. The 5 of Wands is, it's all of these things that are going to bash up a hornet's nest. That's a new way of interpreting the 5 of Wands, but it makes a lot of sense. And so I think that if you are, if you're an intuitive reader, if you're reading these cards, or if you have a lot of knowledge of the tarot, I think that these will really help people. So I think this is actually, although it's very different from the traditional decks in a lot of ways, I think this actually would be a good first deck because it has a lot of information that makes sense, that doesn't have to be reinterpreted of what these old symbols mean. A lot of that reinterpretation has already been done for you by the artist. So, and then the Seven of Wands, similarly, that, rather than, standing up and pushing away those other people, there's all of this fire, and then there's this one that's blooming and is, a much more positive. It's being positive in the midst of all of this. So it's a new interpretation, but I think that's one that's very easy to understand and is a good learning deck. For the court cards, you can see here the page holding the light bulb, the knight on a skateboard, the queen holding a torch, always has the cat, a very important element, and the king also holding a torch. And I think that this, with the red flag, I think is something that, it's actually something that is used in the imagery of the New Age Tarot that I have shown you before. It's an out-of-print deck that I have. But the idea of the King of Wands being this revolutionary leader and this red flag being, like a revolutionary symbol. So I think that that's interesting. For the cups, we have this overflowing teacup for the ace. There's a lot of teacups you'll see here. And, the Three of Cups, this tea with friends sort of thing. And you don't know this because it's been offline for a long time, but I used to have a blog, which I may resurrect because I still own the domain name, but it's called threeofcups.net. And it was about party food for adults. I had all this food based on Alice in Wonderland as my first thing, and then I got a full-time job and it fell apart and I didn't have time to update it, so it went offline. I may resurrect it, but it was called Three of Cups because, one, because of this card. Two, because I have always identified with the fairy Merryweather from Sleeping Beauty. I know it's popular to say you identify with Maleficent. That, I am the misunderstood evil fairy. But I really identified with the chubby blue fairy who lived under a tree in the forest, and she was the practical one who actually knew what she was doing, and everyone else, the flora and fauna were just like, no, we wanted to have fun, and Merryweather actually rolled up her sleeves and did something. So I always really connected with Merryweather. And I don't know if you remember the scene from Disney's Sleeping Beauty, but when Aurora's turning 16 and they're going to make her a cake and stuff and not use magic because they don't want to draw attention to themselves, and no, they're all idiots and they don't know what they're doing without magic. And one of the other, either flora or fauna, I get them confused, is going reading a recipe for cake, and she's like, okay, 3 cups of flour, cups. And she just grabs random teacups from around the house to measure things with, which is, even as a child watching, I knew that was not how you measured for cake. But this is a very long tangent to say that I really like this interpretation of the Three of Cups because it brings back all of those Three of Cups references for me, in a modern kind of way. So, moving on a little bit, we also have things here is it's an interesting interpretation of the Six of Cups, which is sort of there's this sort of recycling. So there, there's a plant pot, looks like with rosemary, and there's a trash can, and there's a bucket for sand, and so. I think these are like treasures from childhood that are basically garbage. The way that, I have a very young niece, and when, my mom will when she has time with her grandma, my mom will, have her make art out of garbage of, the recycling bin. And I think that, that's what's speaking to me here. So, it's interesting takes on that. This Nine of Cups, which is usually, the merchant sitting there with all those cups behind him. Here we have, trophies. And interestingly, the Ten of Cups really harkens back to the what is usually the Seven of Cups. So, the what looks like the Seven of Cups to me with this, like, they're all up in the air with things coming out of them, but really they're all, good things and positive things, and there's the rainbow symbol there. And the Seven of Cups here is, ships and bottles, things on shelves, kind of a curio cabinet type of thing of, like, what's good, what's bad. So I think that's an interesting interpretation there. Okay, the Page of Cups is a wheelchair user. The Knight has roller skates. The Queen is using a scrying bowl with crystals. And the King has a strong resemblance to Mr. Rogers. I assume that's intentional. For the swords, I think of this sort of like as the suit of sharps in this deck, because the iconography changes from card to card, but they're all sharp and pointy things. So, the ace is this pocket knife. I think the Three of Swords is interesting, that they're these sewing needles, and they're not piercing the heart here. So I think that that's an interesting, this is a very gentle deck. There's, like I showed you, like the bad majors earlier, and they're not all, it's a very gentle deck. So I think that if you're looking for something that's gonna tell truths, but go a little easy on you, I think this is a good deck for that as well. I really like this Four of Swords, at the cicada buried underground of, like, just, like, hibernating. I really like that imagery. I really like this kind of magpie nest aspect of the Seven of Swords. If you've seen any of my reviews, you know that I have a positive interpretation of the Seven of Swords, and I really like this card for it. That are, like, gathering your treasures together. I like it. This Eight of Swords is very explicit about breaking your own bonds. The Nine of Swords, I have to meditate on this one, because it's just like, it's 9 sharp things of various different uses. So I think that this is the one I actually question. I'm not sure how this is a good reinterpretation, but I'll have to think about that a little bit more. And, the Ten of Swords is also, it has this this regenerative aspect of, there's this bird with swords in it, but then, like, rising above it is this egg, which is also like your skeleton. So it's like, is the soul rising up? Is this being an egg being reborn? It's a little ambiguous, but I think it definitely has that regenerative cycles end, cycles begin aspect. The Page here is reading a book. The Knight is on a bicycle. The Queen is on the throne, and she has a butterfly here. And the King has a megaphone. Like I said, with, this is definitely, it's called Fifth Spirit because it is very much a queer, genderqueer type deck. And, the energies of the kings and the queens, their energies, they are not genders. And then lastly, we get the Pentacles, that the ace is this amaryllis bulb. I really like the balancing aspect of the Two of Pentacles here, that usually, it's the juggler, and this is like this really precariously balanced seeds on top of a trowel. So it's not only that these things are precariously balanced, but that you're going to do something with them. The trowel is to plant them somewhere. And they're tree seeds. One is a maple and one is a walnut. The Six of Pentacles, I think very interesting, that, it's this, like, donating to charity aspect, making that explicit. The Five of Pentacles, this wasn't, did I use it backwards? I have them backwards in the deck. So yeah, this was the Six. The Five of Pentacles, I think, this burial cairn, but then the loaf of bread with the religious symbol on it out front, I think is a very interesting interpretation of that, of, like, feeding the dead. And this is the Four, which is very much taking into consideration the rooting aspect of the Four of Pentacles, that, these are your resources that you're drawing from. Getting to the court cards, the Page also has an amaryllis bulb. The Knight is a backpacker. The Queen is potting a plant, and the king is this sort of magician-y type character. So that is all of the cards. Let's see them shuffle. Like I said, I have shuffled them before and I did not have a problem. They are fairly big. They fill my whole hand. But they're just at the size that I can just manage to get it. And you can see they shuffle really nice. I think that this is a really good weight of card. And like I said, they also have that linen finish that gives them enough grip when you're shuffling them, so that they don't go everywhere. So that is my review of the Fifth Spirit Tarot by Charlie Claire Burgess. And I hope, I really like this deck. I think it's a really good deck for people who are beginners or for more advanced readers. I think it's great for intuitive readers or for people who have more traditional aspects. I think that I think it's a really great deck. Thanks for watching. Please give me a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel for more reviews and readings, and I will see you back later. Thank you so much.